We all need to see a doctor at some point in our lives, but it's not getting any easier or cheaper. Data consistently shows bulk billing rates are down, meaning more Australians are paying more to see a GP, and per the Statistics Bureau, 25 to 34-year-olds are the most likely cohort to delay a doctor's visit due to cost. That's why both major parties have announced plans to make as many doctor visits free as possible. The bipartisan push has wide support, but in today's deep dive, we'll look at why some experts warn that the trip to the doctor could still carry a price tag for some time.
Harry, I don't think it's going to be news to anyone that it's hard to find a bulk billing GP. We get lots and lots of messages at TDA from people who are incredibly frustrated and increasingly frustrated when it comes to paying for medical services and the inability now to find a GP who will bulk bill them. What's this latest announcement about?
I think it's really interesting that you say it like that, because I've even had people say to me recently, are we turning into America when it comes to healthcare? Their system is largely for profit, but Australia for 40 years has had this system called Medicare, which was designed to make healthcare universal and free for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful to start at why we're talking about free doctor's visits, since that's basically what Medicare was meant to be initially. It has changed over time. So when you go to a GP, think a medical clinic or a local practice, we have a system in place where doctors can bulk bill. And that's where Medicare will give the practice money directly to see a patient. A doctor can opt to charge a patient directly, which involves what's known as an out-of-pocket cost. So let's just say you go to see a doctor, it costs you $60. Medicare will give you about $42.85 back, and that leaves you with a $17.15 out-of-pocket cost.
Very specific. Love it.
Very quick math. Well, I think a lot of people walk away from these doctor's visits actually having to do that maths really quickly in their head, thinking like, sheesh, how much did I just pay for a 15-minute referral? I just needed to get a slip of paper, or I needed to get a prescription or something of that sort. And that's because back in 2003, we saw the introduction of what's known as the bulk billing incentive. Rather than keeping bulk billing as universal as it was designed to target specific groups who needed to go to a doctor, perhaps more than others. If we think of pensioners, kids under 16, or someone who holds a concession card for various reasons. So that incentive was increased, tripled actually in November 2023. And that was because we were starting to see a decline of bulk billing rates right across Australia.
Okay, so there's this bulk billing incentive. It's meant to be incentivizing GP practices to bulk bill more people more often. Is that what is actually happening?
Look, generally speaking, no. The official figures show fewer than half of Australians saw a fully bulk billed GP in 2023 to 2024. And that was down from slightly above 50% the year before that.
Okay.
On average as well, Australians are paying about $45 out of pocket to go and see a GP. And underpinning all this, we actually know through data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics that the most likely group to avoid seeing a doctor because of the cost is 25 to 34-year-olds.
Squarely our demographic.
I would say so. We fit right neatly in there, don't we? And the government, for its part, would argue that since bringing in this triple bulk billing incentive back in November 2023, the rates of bulk billing for those targeted groups, so that's under 16s and concession card holders, has actually increased.
Okay.
But the same isn't true for you and I, young adults.
Yeah.
So what we saw this weekend was the government announced that it would extend that extra payment, that same payment that it's giving to under 16s and concession card holders, to everyone who visits a GP starting this November. So if a doctor bulk bills every patient, they'll be eligible for these higher payments, and that'll also depend on location. So you actually get more as a doctor out in the regions compared to in the cities.
So again, that incentivizing.
Yeah, that's right. And I tend to understand these things through the prism of politics. As we know, Labor loves to run a campaign on health.
Yeah.
And so they came out with this really big announcement, $8.5 billion worth of investment into Medicare.
If they are elected at the next election. So just to be really clear, this is not something that is happening now, today, tomorrow. It's only happening if they're elected, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But bit of a spanner in the works, the coalition came out and matched the Labor government dollar for dollar.
I'm pleased to announce today the coalition government is committed to $9 billion worth of investment into our general practice network.
And it should be said that it's fairly rare, especially for an investment of this size, to see this as almost bipartisan policy for both sides of politics to agree that this is worthy of investment and the same investment.
I think if Labor was wanting to have a bit of a tussle over the sheer figures of investment, they were sorely disappointed by the coalition coming out and supporting this measure. But we can be guaranteed that should either Labor or the coalition at this stage get over the line at this election, which is due by the 17th of May, then we can see this bulk billing incentive roll out by November.
Harry, I'm really interested because clearly the fact that both sides of politics are supporting this move, there is widespread support for it. I am, though, curious about some of the criticisms of it. We've heard from peak health bodies, from GPs themselves. What are some of the criticisms that we're hearing about this policy? Are there any?
Hi, I'm Ola.
And I'm Elliot.
We're the two-person team behind everything video and audio here at the Daily Aus.
If you want to help us grow so we can deliver more of the content that you love, be sure to hit subscribe.
Now let's get back to the video.
Yeah, I think that goes to the heart of what this is all about, which is that it's an incentive and not enforcement. So no one's going to make a GP bulk bill their patients. But the central question is whether this incentive is enough to cover the costs of running a clinic.
Because those costs have also gone up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cost of living crisis, it's absolutely not exempt. And so GPs are going to be faced with this question of, will I get this bulk billing incentive, or would it be more viable for me to continue to charge out of pocket for these patients? The government's pretty confident about the incentive working to get up to 9 out of 10 doctors' visits bulk billed by 2030. I did put this question to the peak body, the Royal Australian College of GP President, Dr. Michael Wright, and here's a little of what he told me earlier.
But just because that incentive has been available to everyone doesn't mean everyone's going to get bulk billed, because Medicare rebates still don't cover the cost of care, and so not all practices will be able to participate in this initiative.
Okay, so what he's saying and what you're saying here is some of the criticism is that the amount that is given to a GP clinic, for example, or a medical centre to cover the bulk billing is less than the amount that said GP clinic could get through out-of-pocket costs and charging the patient.
That's right. And it doesn't cost the same right across Australia to run a clinic either. And it definitely depends on all the overhead costs that come with that. So I think there's a very fair question of whether it's viable for the future of a GP workforce. And another thing that Dr. Wright also mentioned to me earlier is that if you have this incentive rollout and more clinics decide to bulk bill, then that means more people are going to go see a doctor as well. Yeah. Just naturally.
Supply and demand.
And the government's response to this is that it's offering more traineeships, so 400 nursing apprenticeships and 2,000 junior doctor trainees by 2028. But whether that's going to be enough to fill what we know is a really stretched workforce.
Yeah, really strained. There has been so much information about GP burnout. And it's interesting in the context of this sort of discussion about whether it is, as you said, commercially viable for this model to work and how you balance that with the need for patient care.
That's right. And it's really interesting that both Labor and the Coalition are on a unity ticket for this measure and that it is very likely that we're going to see these incentives roll out starting in November. It will be a matter of how many GPs decide to take up that incentive. And we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on it. I'm sure many of my friends and many of your friends and family who are always looking for a bulk billing GP will notice any difference. Will you be able to find one in your local area?
With more ease,
That's the great question. Will it work?
Well, have to stay tuned for that one. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Daily Aus. If you learned something from today's episode, why not send it to a friend? Share the love. That's how our little media company grows. We'll be back again this afternoon with some more headlines. But until then, have a great day.